So I'm just going to go ahead and start there, kind of an overview of fixed assets, what the capabilities are there, and then we can move through some of the other topics. So it has a fixed, Business Central comes with a full fixed asset module here. And when we look at an asset, adding them, we can have multiple books, for example, a book that posts versus tax books, and an unlimited number of books that you can have. And I'll pull up an existing asset and we'll kind of go through some of the things that are system defined versus some of the things that you can also define as user defined tags and pieces of information you may want to track for your asset. And I'll just, as we're going through it, just so we don't spend the whole hour on fixed assets, you set up the assets in a card. You can also purchase assets through the purchasing module as well. So, and generally that's done through a clearing account, right? So if you know you're buying an asset, you don't know the cost yet, it does integrate with purchasing POs and purchase invoices as well. So for today, we're just kind of in the fixed asset management module. Fixed assets themselves, I'm letting the system number in, but if you have an internal numbering convention for the assets, that can be manually done as well. And you can set up your own numbering sequence in here. So if you have some internal alphanumeric characters or just numeric characters you can set the system's flexible enough to handle user-defined numbers, manual overrides, as well as what the system will come with. A couple important things, just, I think we're all probably familiar with assets in general, is, we have some codes, a class code that we can put in here. I have two, tangible and intangible. These are user-defined lists. So if there are other groupings that you'd like to put here, other ways that you describe your assets or just kind of tag them, again, that's user-defined. The subclass code is as well. So within a class code, what type of assets do we group things by, right? Furniture, land, computers, servers, things for your shows. So again, just kind of putting some tags, user defined, right? So no limit to the tags that we can add and assign to our assets. So we're not stuck to some system defined list for these. Get out of that. You can have an asset. We'll note here that you can have main assets and components. I don't have that turned on today, but if you're buying a bunch of small pieces and they're going to be maybe put together and grouped into a main asset, you can set an asset up as the main asset where there's components under it. And maybe each one of those components, maybe some of them have different lives or different maintenance periods, right, that they need to be swapped out and then added to the main asset. So the system does have the capability of classifying an asset as a main asset and then linking what would be considered component assets to that asset. Under the book area, this is where we can define our depreciation codes. Books are also user defined. I happen to call one company a tax book. You may call it internal, and then maybe federal taxes, state taxes, or whatever you would like to define the books as. But the books is what carries our depreciation rules, and we decide which one of the books we want to post to the general ledger. Right. So generally, we'll have one book that posts to the GL, and then the other books for collecting information about that asset, maybe different depreciation methods depending on what the reporting is for. So I'll come down here, we'll say, maybe we want to add a new book to this. Just kind of take a look at that screen here. We can then start to set the rules. Maybe we'll call this demo book. Just to give it some values here. So I can make that a little bit bigger for you guys. So we can then start to set the rules for what will happen with this book as we run depreciation against, as we transfer costs in and out, right? So there's, some things why I would allow depreciation below zero, as a fiscal year, 365 days. The reason that's there is that some of the depreciation calculations here will use 360 days by default. So we can set it to override that, use a 365-day year. As we come down, this is where we select, is this a book that we want posted not just to the fixed asset subledger, but to the general ledger? Since I already have a book set up to post to the general ledger, we'll leave these off. But, if you needed to mix and match, I don't know why you would, but maybe cost comes from one book and depreciation is posted from another, right? So we can pick the transaction types that we want to have integrated to the GL based on the books that we assign to the asset. In all cases, when you run depreciation, all the books will, the fixed asset subledgers at the book level will capture that information. Depreciation for the tax book versus depreciation for the corporate book, but generally we only want one of those posted to the general ledger. Duplication is that we do want to duplicate this across books if we have that. And if you buy assets in foreign currencies, right? You may want to hold that exchange rate that you bought it at with the asset, right? Because for revaluation purposes, the asset would not revalue if you were doing had multi-currency on your general ledger and you were doing balance sheet revaluations. Fixed asset falls into one of those areas where that stays at the cost that you purchased it. So there's the ability here to, to adjust the exchange rate, to adjust the exchange rate to make sure it stays at the acquisition cost rate for the asset. So all that things controlled here at the book level that we would have. The last kind of fast tab on an asset here is if we are tracking maintenance records. And there is a maintenance ledger to this as well. So if there is scheduled maintenance, or we can set that schedule up, the asset can carry that information on when maybe the next maintenance date should be, who the vendor is who services that asset. It's a little bit more informational at that point, but if we can also set up the system to where if the cost for that maintenance needs to be rolled in and added to the asset, that can be done as well, increasing the cost basis and impacting future depreciation. Reporting wise, and we'll look at the on an asset, again, we can run the reports from, for all assets, we do that from here as well. Let's see, good one here is let's look at some details, just to get an idea for some of the things that the system is collecting. I'll run this for the company book. I don't have too many assets in here, so we don't need a new page per asset. Let's go and preview. Oh, that's really small. So this is just, kind of a generic analysis here, and as I added a few assets recently, so we have the acquisition, the depreciation that would continue to add on to a report like this as we ran the depreciation. Tells us how many days it's depreciated for, what the posting date was what was for that depreciation. So as activities occur in the fixed asset module, acquisitions, write-offs, write-downs, etc., the reporting is going to build up, right, on what we want to see, and we can filter these out by date range as well if we're only interested in a certain date. The system will also project fixed asset values and depreciation. So if somebody's looking at a forecast and they kind of want to get the depreciation numbers for what you have today, we can run a projected value report, and we can see the projected value between any two dates. I'll run this for a quarter. I've only run depreciation in this example through January. And if we take a look here, we'll be able to see on a per asset basis what the depreciation is for the periods that I want to view that for. All right, so we have a conference room table. We can see January is 8 days. I'm going to get 20 days, 31, and so on. All right, so for budgeting purposes or FP&A, this could be a useful report to give to them so they have those actuals or even the projection of what those actuals will be for the assets you currently own. Depreciation-wise, very easy to run. There is a routine for running depreciation. We select the calculate depreciation. We simply tell the system I want to run depreciation through, say, February 28th. We can say this is Feb 2019 depreciation. I can give it a description. And I'll run this for all assets. You can see where some of those tags that we could put on there, class code and subclass code, allow us to group assets, right? So if I'm only, for example, for some reason, only want to run the depreciation at this moment for tangible assets, because maybe I know that there's more intangibles coming and I haven't posted that yet, we can do that. You can filter this so it only runs for that group of assets. Simply clicking OK will generate the depreciation entry that updates the fixed asset subledger as well as the general ledger. And that would be all it would take to run your depreciation for a month. We can see the journal entry here that's going to be proposed. Everything that we put on the window is there. There is some setup within the system to assign the accounts that will be used. So for example, in our setup, we've chosen what our depreciation expense account is. We can see by this account type that the fixed asset is going to be the other side of this. So this is where that accumulated depreciation is being tagged, not just to the accumulated depreciation account, but assigned to the asset itself. And then we would just post that. If I can go to the right place. It's okay. My demo, we haven't closed to 2018 in the demo system, so just let me know. And we can move on from there. One last thing I'll touch on here is on the depreciation methods. There are multiple methods in here. So, tax books may have different methods than your internal book. You can also specify some use-defined methods, right? So if you have to set specific percentages by year, maybe year 1's 25, year 2's 50, year 3 is 25. You can create your own use-defined depreciation methods that could be applied to that book. But the system comes with the standard ones that you would expect. Double declining balance. Double declining balance / straight line is it switches to straight line in the last year of an asset. So kind of a combination there.